All right, so today we're going to be looking at addiction recovery, and we're going deep with some insights from New Life Recovery Centers. And I got to say that their approach is really fascinating. What's really grabbed me is this idea that understanding the stages of recovery isn't just for people, who are dealing with addiction themselves. It's kind of like a roadmap for personal change, like anyone can use it.
Yeah, you know what? That's a great point. It is surprisingly applicable to all different kinds of life changes. And what New Life Recovery Centers really does a good job of highlighting is this thing called the stages of change model, which was developed by Prochaska and DiClemente.
Okay, stages of change. It sounds kind of clinical, but how does this actually play out in the real world?
Well, you can think of it like this. So instead of just looking at change as like this instant flip of a switch, it recognizes that we move through these like separate, distinct phases. And each one has its own, hurdles and opportunities. And knowing where someone is in this process can make a huge difference in how you help them. Or even just in understanding your own struggles with change.
So it's not just about willpower. It's about understanding that there's this whole process happening.
Yeah, exactly. New Life Recovery Centers points out these three big benefits to understanding these different stages. First, it gives us that roadmap. So, that makes recovery, which can seem really daunting at first, feel a lot more manageable. And second, it helps reduce the frustration and stigma that comes with this expectation that change should happen overnight, because change takes time, and this model recognizes that.
And that third benefit they talk about.
Right. So the third benefit is that it really encourages people to keep going. Because if you see it as a journey with these different stages, rather than like a pass or fail kind of thing, it makes it easier to pick yourself back up if you stumble, which, let's face it, happens in just about any change process.
Okay, so let's break this down. What's the first stage on this roadmap?
So it all starts with a stage called pre-contemplation. And this is where you see a lot of denial and resistance. You can think of it kind of like that check engine light in your car. You just keep ignoring and hoping that'll just go away on its own.
Okay, I can see that. But, if someone's in that stage, how do you even start to, help them see that they need to change?
Yeah, that's the million-dollar question. And honestly, there's no easy answer. What New Life Recovery Centers emphasizes is that it's not about labeling the person as being in denial. It's about realizing that this is like a normal human reaction. And if you push too hard, it can actually backfire.
Yeah, it's like
Yeah.
telling someone to calm down when they're already upset. Not really the best way to go about it.
Exactly. The key here is like compassionate understanding. This stage is often about meeting people where they are, like planting those seeds of doubt and just gently nudging them towards looking inward.
Okay, so let's say those seeds start to, sprout. What happens next?
So then that takes us to the contemplation stage. And this is where that like internal tug of war starts to happen. The person is starting to acknowledge that, yeah, there's a problem, but there's this wavering back and forth, weighing the pros and cons, feeling the fear of the unknown.
So they're teetering on the edge, but not quite ready to jump into action yet. That sounds like a really tough spot to be in.
Oh, it is. New Life Recovery Centers really stresses this point, that this stage is when support is the most important. The person's vulnerable, their motivation is really fragile, and just gentle encouragement and non-judgmental guidance can make a huge difference.
Okay, so then, how do we move someone from contemplating change to actually, prepping for it? What does that look like?
Right. So then we come to the preparation stage. Think of it like gathering your tools and mapping out your route. Before you head out on a big journey, the person is taking these small but important steps, like researching treatment options, setting goals, maybe even confiding in some people they trust. It's all about building momentum.
Okay, so they're building up that foundation, getting ready to make some big changes. It's like they're finally packing their bags for this
Yeah.
journey. What happens when they're, ready to take that first step?
That's when we get to the action stage. This is where things really start happening. You see active change taking place, like maybe they're going to therapy or attending support groups, maybe even going through detox. It's all about putting in that hard work,
Getting those challenges head on.
Yeah, like they're actually setting off on that journey they've been preparing for. It can't be easy. No, not at all. This stage takes a ton of courage and resilience. But you know what New Life Recovery Centers really emphasizes here is that this is where you start to see the rewards. You start to see how those changes you're making are having a positive impact. You start to feel a sense of accomplishment, and you start to feel empowered.
So it's not all just struggle and hardship. There's this sense of progress and hope, too. Okay, so let's say someone's made it through the challenges of the action stage. What happens next?
Well, then we move into the maintenance stage. And you can kind of think of it like shifting from that initial burst of energy you need to start something to running a marathon. It's about keeping up those positive changes you've made, making them like a core part of your everyday life.
So it's less about like these big dramatic shifts
Yeah.
and more about consistency and commitment.
Exactly. New Life Recovery Centers uses this really powerful phrase. They say, making recovery a permanent part of daily life. And it's a good reminder that this isn't about reaching some finish line and declaring yourself cured. It's about integrating these healthy habits into who you are.
That actually brings up something I was curious about. The source talks about relapse as a potential stage. And it seems kind of counterintuitive to think of it as a stage.
Yeah, I can see why you'd say that. But New Life Recovery Centers has this really interesting take on it. They don't look at relapse as a failure. They see it as a possible part of the journey, like a normal setback that if you handle it the right way, can actually teach you a lot.
So it's not about avoiding relapse at all costs. It's more about learning from it if it happens.
Yeah, exactly. It takes away that shame and guilt that people often feel when they relapse. And it lets them see it as a chance to adjust their approach and really strengthen their commitment to recovery.
That makes a lot of sense.
Yeah.
So we've been talking about these stages in general, but I'm wondering, how does New Life Recovery Centers actually put this model into practice? What makes their approach different?
Well, what's interesting to me is that they don't just talk about this model. They actually build their whole treatment philosophy around it. They're all about personalized care plans. So they tailor their approach to each person's individual needs and where they are in the recovery process. It's not a one-size-fits-all program.
So they really are taking that roadmap analogy seriously.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. They offer this whole range of programs. So, like detox for people in the early stages, residential rehab for people who need more intensive support, and then outpatient programs like PHP and IOP for people who are transitioning back to everyday life. They even have lifetime aftercare, which shows how committed they are to long-term support.
Wow, that's impressive. It seems like they're really dedicated to being there for their clients throughout that whole recovery journey. And speaking of journeys, there's another part of their approach I found really interesting. It's this emphasis on holistic wellness.
Oh, yeah. That's really where New Life Recovery Centers stands out. They understand that lasting recovery isn't just about not using substances. It's about taking care of every part of yourself.
So it's about more than just addressing the addiction itself.
Way more. They recognize that to really heal, you have to address the physical, the emotional, the intellectual, the social, even the spiritual parts of a person's life. It's about creating a life that's worth staying sober for.
Okay, so let's unpack this holistic wellness approach. Where do they even start?
Yeah.
It's like they're saying that addiction, it impacts the whole person, right? Not just this one isolated part of them. So how does New Life Recovery Centers approach this? Do they have a specific framework for this holistic wellness thing?
They do, and it's really impressive, actually. They focus on these 8 key areas, and the thing is they're all connected, and they start with, like, the foundation.
Physical wellness.
Okay, that makes sense. Because addiction, it really takes a toll on the body, so it seems like rebuilding your physical health would be really important. What does that look like in their programs? Well, it's all about giving people the tools to nourish their bodies, like inside and out. They really focus on things like nutrition education, fitness programs, but they're tailored to each person's needs, and even sleep hygiene, which a lot of people don't even think about.
Yeah, so it's not just about going to the gym. It's about understanding how all these different pieces fit together to create like overall well-being. What about the emotional side of things? I imagine that's got to be a huge part of healing.
Oh, absolutely. Emotional wellness is like at the core of their approach. They have all these different therapies, like individual counseling, group therapy to help people process trauma, learn how to manage their triggers, and develop those healthy coping skills.
It's like they're giving people a toolbox
Yeah.
to deal with all those intense emotions that can often lead to relapse. What about the mental side of things? Is that where the intellectual wellness comes in?
Exactly. New Life Recovery Centers, they recognize that addiction can really kind of hijack your brain. So they put a lot of emphasis on stimulating the mind in positive ways. This could be things like creative expression, learning new skills, or even just having these thoughtful discussions.
So it's about keeping your mind engaged and challenged, but in a healthy way.
Yeah.
I like that. But, recovery, it's not just an internal process, right? It's also about connection. It's about community.
That's right. And that's where social wellness comes into play. New Life Recovery Centers encourages their clients to start rebuilding those healthy relationships, to get involved in support groups, and to find ways to give back to their community. It's all about breaking down that isolation. That can really fuel addiction.
So it's like they're helping people weave this new social fabric That supports their recovery in the long run. I'm sensing a theme here. They're really addressing all these different parts of a person's life. What are some of the other areas they focus on?
Well, there's spiritual wellness, which is about finding a sense of purpose, a sense of meaning in life. And that can look different for everyone. Maybe it's connecting with nature. Maybe it's exploring their faith. Or maybe it's just engaging in mindfulness practices. It's about nurturing that inner spark.
Yeah, it sounds like they're encouraging people to figure out what really matters to them beyond the addiction. What about like the more practical parts of life, like work and finances?
Yeah, so they address that too through what they call occupational and financial wellness. They offer vocational counseling, resume building workshops, even financial literacy programs. The goal is to help people create these stable and fulfilling
So
lives.
it's about giving them the skills and the resources. They need to really thrive out in the real world. It really is a holistic approach. It covers everything, from the physical to the spiritual, and all those practical things in between.
Yeah, and there's one more area they really emphasize, environmental wellness. It's about creating a safe and supportive living environment, a place where you're not constantly surrounded by triggers. It could be things as simple as decluttering your home, bringing in some plants, or even finding a sober living environment.
It's amazing how they've taken all these different elements that seem kind of separate at first glance
Yeah.
and woven them together into this really comprehensive approach to recovery. It really highlights how complex this journey is.
It does, and it really drives home the point that lasting recovery isn't just about willpower or just not using substances. It's about creating a life where you feel balanced and well.
Okay, so we've covered a lot of ground today. We've looked at the different stages of recovery, and we've really dug into New Life Recovery Center's approach. And as we wrap up this deep dive, I'm left with this thought. If this idea of holistic wellness can transform the lives of people struggling with addiction, imagine what it could do for all of us.
That's a really powerful thought. It makes you wonder, what part of our own well-being could we focus on a little more? Maybe it's getting enough sleep. Maybe it's spending more time in nature. Or maybe it's just making time for something creative.
Those are great examples. And I think that's the beauty of this whole conversation. It encourages us to step back for a minute
Yeah,
and ask ourselves, what does well-being really mean to me? And what small steps can I take today to start moving in that direction?
I love that. It's a journey we're all on. And the things we've learned from New Life Recovery Centers can help guide us all, no matter what challenges we're facing.
Absolutely. Well, that brings us to the end of our deep dive for today. We hope you found this exploration as interesting as we have. Until next time, keep learning, keep growing, and keep taking care of yourselves.